Hello everybody. We're back in this build mode tutorial project. I promised I would continue this series even though it doesn't attract many views, but as you guys probably noticed, I will be posting these videos much less frequently. I will show you 3 things today, but the first one will be rotating, as widely requested. Straight off the bat, let's go to the block placer script and create a variable named orientation. This is where we will modify the rotation of the block. Set it to vector 3.0, aka 0, 0, 0. Now, let's put a conditional statement on the input began function to detect and the player presses R on their keyboard. In the case that they do this, we will increase the Y variable of the orientation by 90 degrees. Also, create another condition where the player presses T to tilt. In this statement, we will increase the Z variable by 90 degrees. Now, we will start to work with C-frames, but something you must know is that when applying orientation to a C-frame, it does not use degrees, it uses radians. Let's set up a local function to convert our vector 3, in degrees, to a C-frame, in radians. Since we now have to consider orientation, let's make sure that we configure the C-frame, position and orientation, of our placing part instead of just the position. To apply the orientation, just multiply the C-frame, position, of the part by our C-frame.angles, orientation. Let's also make sure the C-frame gets carried on with and received by the placeBlock remote event. Replace position with C-frame in the following places. Voila! As you can see, you can now easily rotate these objects and place them in those rotations. However, there are 2 issues here. The surface selection can end up on the wrong side and building off of a rotated object can be wacky. The problem is that the target surface gets messed up when a block rotates, so let's create an invisible layer over the rotated part that remains at an orientation of 0, 0, 0. This layer will not do anything, it will just be detected by the mouse instead of the part itself. Make sure to clear all children of the part, make it transparent, and add 0.0001 to each component of the size. This size configuration will make the layer slightly bigger than the actual part so the mouse will detect it first. Also set the surface selections adornee to the layer instead of the placing part. This will make sure the surface selection is on the right side. Now, for the most important part, set the layer's orientation to vector 3.0. Let's also set a function to constantly detect and the placing part C-frame changes and correct the layer's orientation. We're finished with those configurations on the client side, but now let's make sure we make those same changes on the server side. Open up the build handler and type this. Our first problem is fixed. The surface selection is now always on the right side it needs to be on. Our second problem is only half fixed, though. It is still wacky to build off of a cylinder because of one problem, the layer is also cylinder shaped. This is a very easy fix though, all we need to do is just go on build handler and set the part's shape to a block. What? How is the placement still wacky? It's actually because we forgot to slightly increase the size of the layer so the mouse is fighting between detecting the part itself and its layer. Perfect. As you can see, no matter where my mouse is on the cylinder, the surface selection is on the correct side. There's just another problem that we caused by adding this layer. Now, if we try to delete, paint, or pick the block, it will not work because the layer is in the way. We must adjust the script so that it can work with the layer. Start by opening the block placer script and going to the render step function. Here is where we handle mouse detection, so this is the area we need to adjust. First, just replace any instance of mouse.target with mouse.target.parent so that instead of receiving the layer, we receive the layer's parent, the block. Now that we made those changes, we need to create a layer for the baseplate. Start by just duplicating the baseplate and naming it layer. Set the transparency to 1 and add 0.0001 to each component of the size. Once you press enter, the size won't actually show the decimals, but that doesn't mean the data isn't being stored properly. Now all you need to do is just put the layer inside of the baseplate. One other thing you could have done was turned off Can Collide, but that's not heavily important. As you can see, the tools now work not only on parts, but also on the baseplate. We are officially finished with our rotation system. There are a few other systems I want to show you guys in this video though. Let's start with an asset category system. First, start by duplicating the tools frame and replacing the buttons with whichever categories you want. The layout order doesn't matter, just the name of the buttons. I will just have two simple categories for now, basic and decorations. Now, in the Assets folder in replicated storage, create new subfolders for each of the categories. Make sure each asset is inside a category. Create a frame in the build GUI and stretch it as long as the scrolling frame. We will put multiple scrolling frames into this one frame for organization, one scrolling frame for each category. Now insert the current scrolling frame, Assets, into that frame. Make sure that the size of this scrolling frame is 1010, fills up the entire frame. Also set the frame's transparency to 1. Now name the frame Assets and make sure that each scrolling frame within Assets is renamed to whatever category it corresponds to. I'm going to duplicate the scrolling frame and rename it to Decorations. This will be where I will put my decoration assets. This part's optional, but I would recommend every single viewport using the same camera instead of viewports having cameras for each category. My first decoration is going to be a trash can. Like I showed in my last video, you must rename the frame with the viewport, set the text, and set the subject of the viewport. To represent the trash can, I'm just going to use a wedge. I will obviously replace it with a mesh part later, but this is the easiest thing to do for now. Make sure that the default category that the game will start on's corresponding scrolling frame is visible, while every other scrolling frame is not. Open Build Local and start by adjusting the current code to fit our new asset folder hierarchy system. Then, we will also actually implement our scrolling frame visibility. Let's create a for loop that iterates through every category button. If clicked, we run another for loop that iterates through every scrolling frame and makes it visible/invisible depending on whether it corresponds with the correct category or not. Perfect. As you can see, when you click a category button, the scrolling frame changes depending on that. Now, let me actually use a mesh part for our trash can decoration. This part of the video is actually a tutorial on how to have a multiple part block. That is, this is, in a way, how to use models as your assets. Let's open Block Placer and script it so that the descendants of the placing asset are slightly transparent. We can do this by iterating through every descendant using a for loop and setting the transparency to 0.75. Also set the actual block's transparency to 1 if it's like that by default. This way, if the block serves as a hitbox for the descendants and isn't actually visible, it will stay that way. I'm going to actually make my part into a trash can instead of just a wedge. This part will vary based on whatever you want your asset to be, so when it comes to design, the only thing that matters is that everything is inside the hitbox, the initial block. When it comes to the welding, however, there are rules you must follow. First, create a weld constraint in each descendant. Set part 0 to the block and part 1 to the descendant. Second, every descendant of the block must be unanchored for this to work. I'm going to turn can collide to false for the block itself so that there's not like visible walls around the decoration and the trash can has its own collision hitbox. Now that I'm finished with the design and welding, I will put the asset into my asset category folder in replicated storage. As you can see, it works perfectly. My character collides with the trash can but not the block's hitbox around it. It rotates and moves well. For the last section of this video, I will be showing you how to have it so that you can paint descendants of the asset. Since I'm using a mesh part, I'm going to remove the texture. If your descendant is a base part, you won't have to do that. To any of the descendants that you want to be paintable, add a tag named Paintable. Make the changes that I make to the block placer script. Now open Build Local and make the following changes. Now, open Build Handler and make the following changes. These changes make it so that the properties of the descendants change for everybody and not just for the placer. It works on the client side but not on the server side. This is because we forgot to apply the changes to the block when it first gets placed. This is an easy fix. Just call configure desk upon the place block remote event to fix this issue. Voila! The painting works, however a problem is that when moving the placing asset around, it can bump you around. This is because the descendants are never set to non-collidable. Just set the Descendants can collide property to false in the create placing function. Perfect. As you can see, the asset doesn't bump you around anymore. For the rest of the video, I'm just going to set the viewport properly for our new trash can, which took much longer than it should have. Now, concerning my concepts game, I have an update coming up super soon and one that came out a couple weeks ago. The one that already came out is the legacy template in the character creator, which works like the character creator that epic_tank made. My new update coming up soon is actually a UI creator. I finished everything and am just working on some bonus assets, so it won't be postponed like the multi-select feature was. But anyways, I hope this video benefited you and I'll see you in the next one. If you feel like this video has helped you, I would appreciate it a lot if you subscribed. Bye.